Hey everyone! So last week's chapter of My Hero Academia was packed with development, and it was one of those chapters that had tons of exposition compiled with huge amounts of action, which to be quite honest is a pretty rare occurrence for this manga. So there are a few things from my prior theory that have given me some clarity as to how the situation has developed, and I think I've had a pretty good handle on the situation, so I'm here to imply some more possible scenarios. As this week, the title is on break, and as everybody knows by now, this video will contain spoilers for My Hero Academia, meaning if you're not caught up on the manga, this probably isn't the best video for you. So with that being said, if you do enjoy the content here at the bar every week, do me a solid and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to join in on my live premieres, hit that notification bell. That way we can chat as the video goes up. Now, let's head inside and grab ourselves a drink. Alright folks, welcome to the bar. So today we're going to be talking a bit about chapter 320, but also at the same time we're going to be talking more about the various characters that Deku interacted with in this chapter. And at the end we're going to theorize about which character could possibly be the one to pull Deku from the darkness that's enveloped his life. Because at the end of chapter 320, we have several characters that did not voice their concerns to Deku, which tells me that the next chapter is going to be these characters that help pull Deku back. You see, because during this chapter, we see that Deku has seriously fallen, and I'll get more into detail as to how his mental state is affecting his actions a little bit later in this video. But for now, let's head over to the wall and talk a bit more about the various characters that appeared in this chapter to help bring back our boy. Okay, so first things first, once again, chapter 320 started out with this guy. I said it in my last theory video, Ida was going to be the character that didn't feel betrayed by Deku's actions, but he was going to be the character that understood his actions. Horikoshi is playing this exactly the way that I thought he was going to play it, by not ignoring the various characters and their emotions towards Deku. Ida faced off against his arch nemesis within like 3 months of him joining UA, and in fact he operated as a vigilante then because he was an unlicensed student that initiated a fight against a villain. So when we see this panel right here, we should instantly know the type of chapter that we're in for. The rain is beating down on Ida and he's staring down Deku. The last time we saw him with this type of intense look, he was facing off against Stain. Because everything that's going on right now, Ida understands the exact emotions that Deku is going through. But also, at the same time, he knows what it's like to be entrusted with a legacy that he feels like he can't keep up with. Because remember, our boy is Ingenium 2. He didn't know if his brother was gonna live or die that day in the hospital when he was entrusted to become the next Ingenium. So when it comes to legacies, when it comes to being entrusted with a great responsibility of carrying on someone's deeds, to take on their name, to take on who they are, Ida understands. Because look, if there's one person that is standing in front of Deku right now that can honestly have a conversation with him and let him know that he's not alone in all of this, it's this guy right here. It will always be this guy right here. Bakugo can talk about him knowing All Might and Deku better than anybody else all he wants. When it comes to this type of situation, it's Ida's wheelhouse. Anyway, in this chapter, we learn that Class 1A has studied up on Deku's quirks. They didn't go into this situation blind because they did their homework. Also, in addition to him revealing a new move to clear out Smokescreen, Bakugo went full-on meta and even acknowledged that Deku is just drawn differently these days. It's a very meta statement and it's kind of funny to see it put in bold, and I like when manga and anime do this type of stuff because it tries to bring a form of levity to a scene that, for more intensive purposes, is a very dark one. So pretty much from last week's video, I assumed that Class 1A and Deku were gonna have an all-out brawl, and that's exactly what they're doing right now. Also, at the same time, they're trying to get through to their friend though. They have no malice in them whatsoever, and they just want to get a point across to him. And the biggest gut punch to honestly start off the chapter was the first student to yell out to Deku and let him know that he can come back to school. It was Koda. The most soft-spoken kid in your class is now screaming at you and just trying to get you to listen to reason. Like, when I first read this scene, it made me tear up. I had to stop and compose myself for a little bit because this was a moment I just did not see coming, man. I knew that the students were gonna make a conscious effort to take back their friend, but I did not expect Koda out of all people to be this outspoken. And the way that Deku responds to Koda's pleas, he's just like, Koda, I'm sorry. And then after that, he tries to black whip away from Koda only to get caught up by our resident Spider-Man. Now, I hope you guys all know by now that pretty much my favorite character in Class 1A is Zero. I love him. He's Spider-Man. And this scene alone was definitely a huge homage to the webhead himself. And after he escapes from Zero, it just becomes a snowball effect of student after student appearing to try to get through to their friend. He breaks off from Ojiro's tail. He smashes the machine that tries to put him to sleep for Momo. And then there's this scene with Kaminari. If you notice, he just throws his arm around him and tries to talk to him instead of trying to fry his ass. And that's because Kaminari knows that his quirk could probably severely hurt Deku if he puts enough oomph behind it, so he just chose not to even try to hurt him. So when Shoji, Tokoyami, and Kaminari just get shrugged off, it really feels like there's no getting through to our boy whatsoever. But that's when we get this scene, where Deku finally melts down. The entire time, we thought that Deku was just trying to play keep away, though with that final attack, his mask falls off. And what we see is a version of Deku that we probably never thought that we would have ever seen in this series. Deku has become somebody that is so emotionally worn that the crybaby himself is now incapable of crying. And this scene is the scene that really just feels like a slap in the face, because Deku has a quirk that actually tells himself if people are coming at him or others with malice. And the entire time Class 1A is beginning their assault against Deku, Danger Sense hasn't procced once. So what hurts even more inside of Deku is that he knows that every single one of these people are his friends and they just want him to come home. There's no danger, there's no existential threat, there's just his friends. And what it leads to is this scene right here where we just see Deku absolutely melt down. And look, I have a TV for a head. I'm not a psychologist or anything, but if I had a guess, he's suffering from severe PTSD coupled with a massive anxiety disorder. He is constantly in fear for everybody around him, and he thinks that the minute he gets close to someone again, they're just gonna explode like Lady Nagant. So Deku's reaction is just to push everybody away and hope that they'll just stay away. And that's when the heaven-piercing ice wall appears. And what I really enjoyed about this action was that it doubled as a metaphor. The reason why Deku was frozen by Todoroki just now was because he needed to cool off. And what Shoto says to Deku definitely parallels their conversation at the sports festival. But what this told me is that this is the turning point in the chapter, and now the characters that have a closer connection to Deku are going to start speaking out, because right after this scene, the cliffhanger is where Froppy appears. Now, her appearance as the cliffhanger for the next chapter is the most integral cliffhanger to this entire arc. The reason why I say this is because Sue is the character of reason. She's also the character in the series that absolutely tells it like it is, and she will not pull her punches with you. And her showing up right now is meant to show you that she's grown so much since Bakugo was kidnapped by All For One, because she was seriously hurt by everybody when the class went off to save Bakugo on their own. It was an unnecessary risk that they took, but it was a learning experience for her, because now she's not going to make the same mistake when another classmate is in trouble. She's going to go there and make sure that Deku comes back safe, and that's why she's on the last page, because she sees it exactly for what it is. Every single one of them is there to become that comic book superhero. And if that is the case, what makes him any different from them? If he wants to go out there and play this game, there's no way that Class 1A is going to let him live out his fantasy alone. And that's how the chapter ends, with a cliffhanger leaving us staring down, wondering what's going to happen next because there's a 2-week break. Personally, I do think that there's a few things that will happen. Number one, the top 3 people that I expect to get through to Deku and eventually have the most emotional pull on him is Ida, Ochako, and Bakugo. Now, if I were to throw my personal feelings into it, I would really like if Ida is the person that has the conversation with him face to face and brings up Stain to let him know that he was in that exact same hole that he is in right now. I mean, when Ida had that knife in his shoulder and was pinned down to the ground, he was screaming at his friends to get out of there. It wasn't their fight. And Deku looked at him in the face and said, absolutely not. But if that's the case though, where in Deku's mind does he think that for a second Ida is going to abandon him in this endeavor? There's absolutely no way whatsoever that that's going to happen. The thing is, as much as Horikoshi loves to write his characters going through substantial amounts of growth, the story moves around in the background without us even knowing. Because while Froppy is going on her diatribe, we see that Best Jeanist and company is definitely headed to the city where they all are, which means that we could see a wave of villains showing up knowing that there's so many heroes in one spot. Maybe even a Nomu. This would give Class 1A the opportunity to tell Deku to sit the fuck down and watch what they can do. Because if anything, we the reader need to be convinced that Class 1A would not be a detriment. Because for the past 2 months of us reading My Hero Academia, we've seen Deku operate as a full-blown solo hero. He's taken down some pretty notable villains by himself, but at this point, the biggest enemy that Deku is facing is himself. So that's what Class 1A is here to tell him. We need to acknowledge the sadness that's going on inside of our boy right now. Because like I said, the character that's known for being a crybaby is incapable of crying at the moment. He's covered in blood, scars, and mud, and it feels like the window to actually have him come back is shrinking. Events that he's experienced in the past will eventually come back to slap him in the face, and hopefully bring him back to reality. Because like I prattled on back in the beginning of the video, there's still a handful of characters that have yet to make their point to Deku. It'll just be interesting to see if all of this happens before an unexpected incursion occurs. My Hero Academia loves to throw a curveball in and bring several layers into a current situation, so I definitely wouldn't sell out the fact that additional villains will show up on scene to try to take out Class 1A. So before we close up shop today, my question is, do you think that Ochako, Bakugo, and Ida will be the ones to get through to Deku? Make sure you leave it in the comments down below. I would like to hear your take on this. Also, if you want to experience any more of my live reactions, be sure to follow me on Twitch. The link is in the description down below. I had a little bit of trouble downloading the VOD this time, but I think I got a hang of it, so I'll be uploading my live reviews on Mondays with the theory every Wednesday. And also, I've heard you guys, there will be more Kaiju number 8 served up here at the bar. So until next time, be safe and be good to each other. Cheers.